this edition of Hashtag the Issue. I'm Mark Carr, and we're here at TV Cogeco Studios, and we're live. So we want you to be involved in this. Get involved in the conversation tonight. Tweet us at Hashtag the Issue. I'm pleased to have a full table with us tonight. Rob Duvall, as always, is the President, Director, Chief Bottle Washer at RDC
That's
Networks,
correct.
And at Haltech.
Yes, I sit on the board of directors at Haltech as well.
At Haltech. And we've got Dave Phillips with us. Oh, I've got the name. I've got the names wrong already, and you gave me your card, Ken.
That's okay.
Ken Phillips, the CAO at Conservation Halton. Nice of you to be here.
Thanks very much for having me tonight.
We appreciate it. Now we'll get to Dave.
There we go, Dave. Yes.
Ward 3, right up there in Halton Hills, living in Georgetown, is Dave Kentner from the big municipality of Halton Hills. We're glad you could.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
We're glad you could come. Beverly Thorpe, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, Beverly. So let's ask you where you're from.
Hi. Well, thank you very much. I'm with the CTC, Source Protection Region. I'm the project manager, and that's the credit, the Toronto and Region and Central Lake Ontario Conservation Authorities.
And I would never have remembered that. But tonight's issue, we're going to be talking about something that everybody has access to, and it's water. Whether it's clean water, dirty water, and keeping it clean is really the issue. And I guess for total to let everybody know, I am the executive director in my day job of the Ontario Waterworks Association. So just to be fully, let everybody know right up front where I'm coming from on it. So, Rob, what do you think of the entire subject of water? It's something that people don't give a lot of thought to.
People don't give a lot of thought to it. We have a lot of issues with water bottle companies, especially on the high-tech side that tap into the well system, and that has been talked about quite a bit in the last little while, running that a little bit dry in some areas, actually to the point where it really has a devastating effect on some communities. So I think we always have to be careful of that. We always look at water because we have so much of it with the Great Lakes, of an abundance of water, and we don't think though of the well water system that we keep tapping into, and that can always be an issue. And I think people also are still a little shaky of the old Walkerton days, where cutbacks and all of a sudden you have real issues there. I think those are things that we should learn from, and we shouldn't forget so easily.
And Walkerton is always, somebody always brings up the Walkerton issue. Beverly, when you're talking about source water, what are you talking about?
Well, we're really talking about municipal drinking water supplies. We're talking about the groundwater, as you've talked about, Rob. We're also talking about the Great Lakes, and obviously here in Halton Hills you get both wells supplying your water up in Georgetown and Acton, but there's also plans to bring lake-based water even further up than there is now. So we're talking about protecting the source of that municipal drinking water, quality and quantity.
Ken, from my point of view, Conservation Halton I used to live in the rural area. They don't have a very good name in the rural area, and we were discussing that just before we went on camera. Can you give us a little background?
Well, we're obviously working to strive to improve that relationship every day. We are a service delivery agency. We are a municipal provincial body, so we do serve the interests of the local citizens. One of the challenges we do face is in dealing with landowners that back in the 50s and 60s, there were some, I would categorize as fairly heavy-handed approaches to acquiring property and so forth, expropriation. The dirty word expropriation was used quite a bit. And unfortunately for us, many people have carried that opinion through the generations. So, as a younger member of the conservation family, and you come in and you think everything's rosy and you're dealing with these people and they bring up something that happened a decade before you were born, you have these challenges of trying to overcome that and work with these people. But no, it is something we acknowledge, and we are trying to work on it every day. And to improve those relationships, we do a very successful stewardship program and land outreach program. So we do a landowner outreach program. So we are making inroads there. But it's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. When you're a regulator and you're trying to protect the environment, and you're trying to protect water sources, you sometimes just don't make friends with people, but that's the unfortunate flip side of it.
Ski hills,
That's
you
right.
do a good
So
job at.
we have that lovely dual role. In fact, if you look at Ontario's conservation areas and you go provincially, you'll notice most of them have lakes. And the reason they have lakes is because they're created essentially for flood control. So Conservation Halton's primary mission is the other side of the water business, that's controlling and help to prevent flooding. So if you look at Kelso Lake, it's a man-made lake designed to capture the water coming off the Niagara Escarpment after rainstorms. Hilton Falls, the same thing. Mountsburg as well has these large bodies of water, all man-made, just designed to help to prevent flooding downstream. But one of the nice offshoots of that is that we're able to provide recreational opportunities for the public. We're able to provide them access to the natural environment, and that's really the nice part of my job.
I'm not sure a lot of people knew it was run by Conservation Halton. So maybe those people that have past history with you should get out and ski down a hill that you keep in great condition all year round. And I've left our politician at the table till last, and he has been very good about being quiet while everybody's had their little say. So much so that I think we could almost just ignore him. But Dave, now you sit on Conservation Halton as a responsibility with Halton Hills Council.
That's right. I do that along with Councillor Brian Lewis, who lives in and represents the rural southwest of Halton Hills, which is the lands that Conservation Halton helped to safeguard. So I also sit on the CTC Source Water Protection Committee as the representative for Halton and Wellington counties, roughly. There's specific municipality names, but it's a long title. So I get an exposure to both, and I'm glad you've left me to last so that I get 55 minutes to talk. Is that the way it goes?
Okay, can we go out and have a coffee?
Sure. They have pizza out there. You can go out and have,
that's right. What I'd like to do is get the audience involved in this Conservation Halton, source water protection, extremely important issues to all of us. You know, we're sitting here drinking tap water, and sometimes people don't think of where it comes from. Beverly, what are your major concerns about source water that people don't normally think about?
Well, that's a good question, Mark. We're in Halton Hills, as I said, a number of folks depend on water from Lake Ontario, and that's a nice, abundant, very high quality supply. But if you live up in Acton or if you live in Georgetown, for sure, because those are areas I know about because they're part of the Credit Valley Source Protection Area, there are quantity challenges up there. The amount of water that's available to service the municipal demand is limited. We've done some studies and identified some, not in the present, but in the future, some challenges that we have to be very careful to protect and make sure that supply is sustainable. There's also some quality problems because the groundwater that you have here is in an area that's fractured bedrock. It's the Niagara Escarpment. It's a beautiful feature, but groundwater traveling through that kind of rock, it can be contaminated quite easily. So it's really important to make sure that the things that are happening on top of the land don't result in contamination getting into the water supply. So both of those are challenges, but certainly ones we can control.
I'm going to put something out there that I think affect everybody and source water and Conservation Halton is quarries. Mm-hmm. Quarries have got a bad name because they impact on the groundwater and so on. But we need that aggregate. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with things like that?
Well,
Anybody just
I'll
fill in.
just,
Yeah.
just to tell you the true story about what we've done a lot of science work to come up with identification what the threats are, the quality, quantity threats. And in all that analysis, none of the quarries that exist right now in Halton Hills are a threat to the drinking water supply, neither from a quantity or quality point of view. That's not to say they don't have impacts on, and Ken may have some comments in terms of the natural environment. But in terms of the source water, at this point, it's not a general problem at all. So I know at the outset there was, we have a representative on our committee actually from the aggregates industry. And she's on that committee because of the concern that it would have an impact on the aggregate industry. I think we were all surprised when the studies were over that that wasn't the case.
But a lot of the quarries go down below the water table. Obviously, there's a tendency for it to flood. They pump that water out and it flows back down. That's the concept anyway. But I know Mount Nemo has had a great deal of difficulty expanding because of the demand for aggregate. And Conservation Halton, along with the city and the region, don't want that to occur. But can you tell me the challenges that you've had with?
Well, one of the challenges, obviously, is just the overall environmental impact. So water is one of the factors you look at in terms of quarry operation. Now, I will say that the aggregate industry is far more responsible today than it would have operated 40 or 50 years ago. You know, just interesting anecdotes I had through the source protection process. I worked in Eastern Ontario prior to coming to Halton, and when we started the source protection process, I was there, and so you got talking to people, and they said, well, the challenge isn't necessarily the old mine, it's the 5,000 boreholes we have throughout the watershed, because we just abandoned them. Like, you punched a hole in the ground to see what was there,
and just
packed
leave.
up and left, and they never capped it. There was everything thing, so the potential for contamination of groundwater sources was huge, and it was factoring those things out. But the MOE, Ministry of Natural Resources, have very tight constraints on how water taking can go and the environmental impacts around a quarry. So if we look at the Nelson
You
quarry,
have to have a license.
that's right. You have to be
take
licensed.
water.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to have a permit to take water from the Ministry of the Environment, is correct. So if you look at the Nelson Quarry situation, one of the big factors in that situation that helped us as a conservation authority have an impact on preventing the expansion was the presence of endangered species and species at risk. And so we are able to point that out through our research to say, oh, you got to be careful. You can't go, this is what the impact's going to be on the environment. So that you set up all these environmental factors, and then the province will take a look at it and say, yeah, it's probably a bad idea if this quarry is allowed to expand. But that is the challenge, is where you're going to get the aggregate. The thing about being on the escarpment, you have that nice limestone that's really good for gravel. You know, people say, well, go to the Canadian Shield, not realizing that we no longer have the rail infrastructure to get the gravel down here anymore. Like, those rail lines are long gone. The rock is so hard that it costs so much money to break up. So it's really working with the aggregate sector. If you look at some of the relationships even Conservation Halton has with various, and we do work with these agencies. You know, we try to make sure that while there is an impact on the environment, it's mitigated to the best it can possibly be. We work with them on terms of rehabilitation of the areas. So you try and make the best of a bad situation, I guess, is the answer I can give you at this point in time. But we do monitor things very closely in terms of the impacts. You know, it's interesting to hear that, because you often hear that the deeper down a quarry goes, the more impact it's going to have on the local water supply. In some cases it is true, in some cases it's not. You really just have to make sure.
But isn't that whether it is going to affect or isn't going to affect, really? I mean, some people would say it's science, and some people would say it's an art form in determining that. But you, as a councillor, have to make that final determination. How do you do that when groundwater can be so severely affected by the development, either industry or commercial or housing?
Well, we rely very much on the advice of our staff, and they, of course, rely on the Conservation Authority and the source water protection people. With the source water protection, when those plans are approved, there'll be roadmaps, and somebody will come in with an application to do something, and you'll be looking at your zoning and whatnot, and we just won't allow something to happen in a certain area, or it'll be fine to happen in that area, all dependent upon what we've found through the source water program. And the same thing happens with the conservation authorities. They provide us with that background, detailed scientific information that helps us put together our official plans and our zoning bylaws that give us the guide as to whether or not a project can go ahead. Very often the project's negative impact, we're talking about whether the drinking water, but the quarries are a great example. First of all, I don't want to listen to that explosion. I don't want to hear the racket of the trucks at 5:30 in the morning lining up to get ready to go and start their day. And I don't want all that truck traffic going down my road. And none of these things are drinking water.
But I
But
want
they're
that
the
new.
things.
But I want that new highway
Well,
built.
That's right, so I can drive
that-
to work easier.
That's the balance.
And thank you very much for the aggregate that went into building our new home. And by the way, don't allow anybody else to build. I'm the last one to build here. And you get all of these kind of factors, which when you get talking about it, everybody realizes, oh yeah, that's the NIMBY or it's whatever. But people sometimes, when they're concerned about, they hit a project coming in, like a Nelson Quarry or whatever it is, a group will form almost immediately. They'll sit down over a cup of coffee and think, now what possible objections can we throw up, or what areas to consider that we don't even know anything about, but they sure sound good to stop the quarry. And we have to filter that out.
But
You know, that's
isn't that democracy? Isn't that what the people should be doing, getting involved like that?
The problem is, quite often they don't. And I think the bigger issue too, and I'm glad that you brought it up, we have a population explosion happening in this area, and you're right, it's not just about the water. Of course, that's hugely important, of course, but it's about all those trucks that we don't have highways to manage them. We don't have the infrastructure to handle the amount of water that they're going to need to drink. And quite often, the province acts like a bad friend at a party quite often, where they leave all the pizza boxes around and then we're here to clean it up at the end of the day. And that's the way I view it. And they're the ones that tell the municipalities, here's how much encroachment is going to happen in your community because we have deemed it necessary to have a population growth here, and then we have to figure out between conservation councillors, a myriad of an army of people, to figure out exactly where the best worst scenario is. I guess that's the only way you can really say it, because it is really the best worst scenario. We're going to have 1 million people in this area in a very short amount of time over the next 15 to 20 years. And that's being very conservative, I think, on those numbers from what we've seen. Just the Dairy Green here and the Boyne survey going in Milton, you're looking at easily 250,000 people. That's just here, let alone what's going to happen in Halton Hills, Georgetown, Acton, all those places. We're running out of room. So we're going to have to deal with these issues very, very quickly.
Okay, we've got a tweet, and I want to remind our viewing audience to get involved in this discussion about water. Can we see that tweet? Let me see. I can't see around the camera. Okay, water. Okay, go ahead.
Water quality and protection in the region of Halton.
Okay.
Great question.
Okay, well, start off, Rob.
Who monitors it?
Yes.
Well, I really don't know who monitors it. So I think we should put the question over to yourself.
It's a good question. The region of Halton is responsible for drinking water in all of the region.
Yeah.
They're responsible for the monitoring, the treatment, and the testing, the reporting, and making sure that there are reports done, properly trained staff do it. So, and that's all spelled out now in terms of what they have to do under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which was one of the pieces of legislation the province brought in after that Walkerton situation.
And there are also some longer-term monitoring programs set up by the province that Conservation Halton participates in. Credit Valley Conservation Halton participates in terms of the Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Network and the Provincial Surface Water Monitoring Network. So there are double layers in terms of complementary in terms of looking at and providing long-term, long-range data in terms of what's happening in specific areas and on specific water bodies.
Okay, so maybe you can clarify for me. We're talking about drinking water, basically.
In my answer, I was focusing on drinking water, absolutely.
But we've got water that goes the other way too, and it's wastewater. But wastewater is handled by the federal government. No, they're the
Yes, you're right.
monitoring
Some
expertise,
yeah.
and drinking water is provincial. First of all, that just amazes me that it's that governments can't get their acts together and say
Well, there's a big
it's
surprise.
all one. But
Well, there certainly are provincial requirements that's called it's been around for probably 30 years now, the MISA regulation, the Municipal Industrial Sewage Regulation, which does set limits on sewage quality that gets discharged. And again, the region of Halton is responsible for the sewage treatment plants to treat the sewage that's generated in the region. And there are limits that the province sets on. The federal government, you're absolutely right, also sets guidelines and limits, but the ones in Ontario, you can have more strict provincial rules than the federal. And in Ontario, it's my understanding that in a number of areas, they are more stringent at the provincial level than the national
and
minimums.
that responsibility is with the Ministry of the Environment,
That's
correct?
And a good example of that is the Hamilton Harbour Remedial Action Plan. Of course, you don't have to go back too far in history. Burlington Bay, Hamilton Harbour, whichever you wish to call it.
We'll call it Burlington Bay.
We'll call it
on-
Burlington
on
Bay
this-
in the
on
interest
this
of our
show, yeah.
Halton residents. But you look at what they've been able to do there in that remedial action plan in terms of cleaning up.
You're talking Randall Reef?
Yeah, well, the Randall Reef is one portion of it, but there's been a lot of work go into that long before. The Randall Reef thing is finally going to happen. I mean, we've been talking about this for 20 years, and it's finally going to happen. They're starting next year to start to cap Randall Reef. But in terms of overall water quality, what's really happened there is you've had the collective efforts of a lot of agencies, and they've actually set a higher standard for the treated effluent that's going to be discharged than anything the province or federal government has mandated. They said, that's nice that that's the standard, but we want it to be this. And you had the City of Hamilton and Halton Region all agreeing that, yes, this is how we're going to proceed and go forward. And you see that right now with the amount they're spending on cleaning up the Skyway waste treatment plant. If anybody's driven by there, it's been nothing but cranes for the last while. That's what they're doing. They're upgrading that facility. Hamilton's upgrading their Woodward treatment plant, which all flows into the lake. And now a lot of residents of Halton have said, why are we paying for that? That's Hamilton's problem, or that's, well, the reality is, folks, that water ultimately flows out of the bay and out of the harbor into Lake Ontario, which then becomes your drinking water. So it's a vested interest. It's that big, round, happy circle of life for water that, whether it's coming from the ground, getting to the surface and filtering down, whether it's coming from the creeks and streams after a rainstorm, whether it's water it's treated wastewater that's being discharged into water bodies, it's all has to be healthy for the environment, for the public, and that's it. We all have a vested interest in making sure that's protected. So,
Mark, I'd like to throw in a little plug for Brother Gary and his team at the Halton region that handled all of this water and sewer. I've found in my experience as a member of the Source Water Protection Committee that Peel region, Halton region, York, these people have very, very sophisticated policies, programs, and infrastructure to protect drinking water. There will be some policies that would affect, that maybe be different than what they would have already had in their plans or whatever. But they're not going to be affected that much. They're already ahead of what we need to do to protect water. And so everybody that drinks water in Halton can rest easy. All our Halton Hills people and whatnot, they're drinking good water. There's no question.
And I agree with you, and
Yep.
Thank you for that for Gary. I'm sure he appreciates it because he's got a real
Yep.
good team with him. But one of the issues that constantly comes up is the cost of drinking water. Are we paying the real cost for drinking water?
Beautiful question.
I guess the comments I'm about to express are mine and mine alone, and not necessarily affect Conservation Halton or any of the boards of directors, but no, we're not. The thing that surprises me about I've been working very hard for the last number of years in trying to educate, whenever I have the opportunity, educate the public about water, period. Be it the most basic things like the water cycle, having worked with cottagers for a number of years, trying to explain to them that evaporation is a real thing. It will have an impact on an open water body in a hot July day and, you know, in the summer, like it's the reality. But it's educating people about the costs. And one of the things that amazes me is people will often look down their nose at treated municipal drinking water, despite the fact they can get a liter or whatever for 7 cents or whatever the cost. It's very minimal cost versus, well, I'll get a bottle of fill in the blank cost of bottled water, particularly from the two major soft drink distributors, and they'll pay $1, $2 for that 500 milliliter bottle of water.
Yet they won't put that on their
Exactly,
water
like
bill.
they would be shocked if that was the cost of water. And I think one of the challenges we're going to have as we go forward is the cost of, you know, the implementation of source protection plans. So do we look at having that as a fee on the water system, on water bills? Do you look at aging infrastructure and how is that going to be accommodated? Because we are getting better at water conservation, but the flip side of that, the water consumption's not there, so how do you factor
How do you
in-
pay for
how
it
do
if
you-
that
how do you pay for it?
consumption
Yeah.
isn't there?
So that's just the challenge. It's really working with people, educating people that they're great value. I mean, I've said this to a lot of people. The only bottled water I will actually drink is probably from the two major, because I know it's municipal drinking water. That's what it is. It's bottled municipal drinking water. And there's not, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know there's not a lot of testing goes on from bottled water, like mineral, you know, the natural
Yeah.
spring water type companies. It's not monitored. They don't.
It's not like the, it's
Yeah.
not like the municipal water
That's right.
monitoring, which is a very rigorous monitoring program.
Like the only really safe, guaranteed quality drinking water you can get is from your tap, from your local municipality.
Okay, we've got a tweet from one of our viewers on this topic, and if we can just put that up on the screen, Chris. Okay, with the Ministry of the Environment facing so many cuts, are the conservation authorities well suited to pick up the slack? Interesting question, and I know, for example, that the Ministry of the Environment's budget is being reduced by 4.3% each and every year for the foreseeable future. So are you guys ready to pick up that slack?
Why don't
Well-
you start, because it's a general conservation.
Yeah, I
question.
think generally speaking, some are, some aren't. That's the reality of conservation authorities. There are 36 in the province of Ontario, and we are very much reflective of the areas which we represent. So to contrast, I was the general manager of the Crow Valley Conservation Authority for 5 years, 2,000 square kilometer watershed, total permanent population of 10,000 people. The big cities had a population, and I use cities in quotations, the big cities had a population of 1,200 people, and I only had 3 of them. So naturally the resources that the authority had were minimal. You know, we tried to participate as much as we possibly could, but you really relied on working with your municipal partners in order to deliver services where and when you could. Versus at Halton, you know, at the Crow, I had a staff of 6 people. At Halton, I have a full-time staff of 130, and you know, several hundred seasonal and part-time staff. It's just a matter of looking at what some of the duties you already do, quite frankly. So it's just tying it into a more integrated watershed management approach as we go forward. But honestly, I think some CAs will struggle, but in the more urbanized areas where they rely on lake-based drinking water, or larger municipal areas where they rely on well-based water, and that would be, if you look at the Grand River, for example, a lot of the municipalities along there relying on surface water there and well water. We have to be prepared. We have to look at and have serious conversations with our municipal partners about how we're going to deliver this service. There will be some concern, obviously, because it's another area where the province will be viewed as not carrying out its role. But I would like to sit and complain about that, but the reality is somebody has to look at doing the work and how we're going to do it effectively, and make sure that we deliver a cost-effective service to the public. So.
And healthy drinking water is...
Exactly. There's nothing else. We will not survive as a society without healthy drinking water. So.
Great. We're going to be right back and get into more of this various issues about something that we use every day, but probably don't give enough of our minds towards it. So stay right with us, and we'll be right back.
TV Cogeco, truly local television.
What's your vision for Canada? We dream of a country where each new generation can explore rugged shorelines, wide open prairies, and vast forests, a place where wildlife can thrive. This is the vision that drives the Nature Conservancy of Canada. We identify the land, we secure it, and we protect it forever. It's that simple and that effective, but we can't do it alone. To find out how you can help, visit natureconservancy.ca.
Everybody knows not to drink and drive, but some people still think it's okay to take drugs and drive. Police have the authority, the ability, and the tools to determine if drivers are impaired by legal or illegal drugs. And because drug-impaired drivers can pose just as great a risk as drunk drivers, they face the same penalties, like the loss of their driver's license, a criminal record, fines, and more. A message from the RCMP, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
TV Cogeco is truly local television, and now becoming a member at TVCogeco.com makes posting your public service announcement quick and easy. TV Cogeco, total access is just a click away.
You're watching TV Cogeco, truly local television.
And welcome back to Hashtag the Issue. We do want you to get involved. If you have questions regarding water, surrounding water, please get on and tweet the station, and we'd love to hear from you. Dave, what were you saying about water?
Well, I wanted to just bring up the fact that Halton region, where we live and we're used to being looked after by this very sophisticated organization, is not the only region I represent. I represent Wellington, and Wellington County works on a different system politically. Each municipality is responsible for their own water supplies. So you end up with a situation. I represent the town of Erin. It's a very small town, very small civil service in the town, and the water department is itsy bitsy. And yet they're going to have the exact same responsibilities and things they're going to have to do, projects they're going to have to undertake, this kind of stuff, without the population base to support it. So they're going to really notice a change in the cost of their water.
Beverly, you were saying that small systems are an issue.
Well, small systems can be an issue. They can be an issue particularly if they're in an area where there's contamination, either existing or the potential for it to happen. And they often, again, in these small municipalities, they tend to drill the well close to where they need to serve the population. So what happens is the development all happens around the well, and then you've got the activities right on top of the area where you want to protect the water supply. So it becomes a bit of a challenge when you've got your town center and your gas stations and your auto body shops and all the houses with their septic systems, because most of these small places don't have the sewage treatment plants and pipes to take this stuff away, all located right over top of the area where the water's also getting to the municipal well. So it's a different challenge for the smaller municipalities.
And that's what happened in Walkerton, wasn't it?
That's what happened in Walkerton,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We can't forget that. And Rob, do you think people understand the cost of water and how important this is to us?
We've been getting away, ever since I can remember, with murder on the amount of water that we pay. We don't pay anywhere near what the true cost is. I think what would end up happening is people would conserve a lot more if they actually did know the true cost of these things. And this has been going on forever. I mean, you buy bottled water, it's more expensive than a liter of gas. And that bottled water is the same water that comes out of the ground or out of the tap that we have in all our municipalities.
But probably with less controls on it than our municipal
Right.
system.
The problem is we've created this atmosphere now of people who are used to paying a certain price. So you can't just go jumping at, to this massive amount of money without giving people literally a heart attack on their water bill. But, we do need to maybe look at other ways of offsetting that. So, more people need to use rain barrels in the summer. More people, these houses that we're building, we should push the people that are making the designs of these houses through the municipality to get approved to have these things in place that look after the conservation of water a little bit more seriously, because I noticed even going up north, up to the cottage and things like that, the water levels have gone way down. They're doing a lot more dredging in the areas for shipping. We don't realize how much dredging actually has an impact on reducing the water level. There's all kinds of factors. But I think people would be more receptive if they saw some movement in the right direction of offsetting maybe some of those costs.
Beverly, when you talk source water, what really is your mandate at the Source Water Committee?
Well, it's what we're responsible for is, first of all, overseeing the science work that identifies where the water's coming from. And I don't mean where the well is or where the intake is, but where the water that gets to that well or intake is moving from. We identify those and call those vulnerable areas. And then we start looking at what kind of things could be happening in those vulnerable areas that potentially either now or if a new activity was to come in the future could contaminate the water supply, and then develop policies which are going to be implemented not by the source protection committees, but by municipalities, by the Ministry of the Environment, some by the Niagara Escarpment Commission. We've directed them to various people. Once they're implemented, they are intended to ensure that contamination doesn't happen. And in most cases, we're not dealing with present contamination, not at all. We're trying to prevent bad things happening in the future.
So that's why when a town or a city is thinking of a new development area, that's why you get involved so much.
Well, and exactly, and trying to ensure that once we've identified, and let's be honest, when the wells were put in the first place, no one knew exactly where the water was coming from. And so when the developments happened, as I said, they often happened close to the well because it was cheaper to make the pipes shorter.
Yeah.
The cost of the pipes is expensive. Now that we know where those areas are, I'm hoping that the policies and the knowledge that we've come up with will help municipal politicians, planners, and others try and avoid creating a development that would cause a problem within these vulnerable areas. And what's important about them is they're not large. And, they're really quite small geographic areas compared to the size of, say, the town of Halton Hills. Mm-hmm. So, but in those areas, special protections protect the water for everybody.
Well, are politicians ready to accept those restraints on their communities?
Well, I think the politicians are certainly at times between the regulations and the will or the impression that the general public has. So we have the responsibility to help with the educational component on that, and I think that's going to be a big factor. But yes, I think that we all drink water. Politicians are strange characters, but we do drink water, and we'd like to be able to continue.
That's the only thing that makes you common to the rest.
That's the only thing that makes us common to the rest of you. I'd just like to point out that when I was asked to be here tonight, and I placed the call to Conservation Halton and down to the TCC Source Protection Agency, told them what I was up to. You see, I get a CAO and a project manager here to keep the politician in line.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, and that's a good thing.
Yeah,
that's,
it is.
That's
Yes,
a good thing.
You know that, don't you?
Yeah. I've had some familiarity with politicians, but Rob, do you think that people really know the impact of not having the water.
They don't. I was at this conference, and it was really interesting. George Karanis from Angry Planet was doing a talk, and he actually said, when was the last time anyone actually went out and touched a tree? Like, we turn on the water and it just comes out. We take these things now for granted, total granted. And I think that's the problem. It's this sleeping giant that everyone, thank goodness, is looking after in the background, but it can go, you know, awry very quickly. I think we've come to the point where we have our blinders on, we go to work, we come home, we go inside, and that's where we shut the door, and we're not engaged in our environment. Where we're lucky is in this area. We do have more young families, and the demographics show that we have more young families moving into this area than we do, you know, people that are you know, elderly, and they're taking their children out to Kelso. They're taking them to go do environmental things. We have a huge green space out here. I think that's massively important. I don't think people have a problem with the basics. I think people are willing to pay a little bit more taxes for safe drinking water, education, and healthcare. I think those are the three major pillars that people are somewhat okay as long as you can.
There's a community member talking to a politician saying that they would accept.
Where I think they start to lose their mind is when they see all these other things that they feel is common sense and it's being wasted, and that's where they all of a sudden start going after, oh, well, we're not going to, they just look at it as a blanket statement. They look at it as a single flat rate tax. I think what we need to do is educate people more on the true cost of what these things are. If they know the true cost, they're probably a little bit more sensitive to shutting off that tap and to making sure that these things are safe, and you know, we're looking after the right things, not the wrong
water
things.
efficiency is a large component. We've got another tweet, so let's have a look at that. If you can put that up. Okay, what communication and education programs work best for conservation messaging? That's an interesting question.
Well, Conservation Halton, we try to get to the children is the best way to explain it. We have a number of education programs, outreach programs that we do. So the most successful we run is the Halton Children's Water Festival. Excellent partnership between Conservation Halton and the region of Halton. We get 4,000 kids a year. We have the perfect outdoor classroom at Kelso Conservation Area. We have 50 different activities. So kids learn from grade 2 to grade 5 everything we can possibly teach them about water, water conservation, where water comes from, how it works in the environmental cycle. So that's a big part of our program. We're now in the 7th year. So we're now talking tens of thousands of kids have gone through that program. So we're hoping to reach that. The model for educating people is always the recycling program, the single most successful environmental initiative ever undertaken in the province of Ontario. And why was it successful? Because they got to the school kids first, who then went home and explained it to mom and dad and pressured them to recycle. We also do in-class things at Conservation Halton. So we have what's called our Stream of Dreams program. So this gives the students a hands-on opportunity. They get to paint a fish. Those fish are then painted on or fastened to a fence along the schoolyard, so the kids have them to demonstrate to the public you know, the importance and what's happening with the water and where it ultimately goes. But in that sense, we also teach them. There's an educational component of that. So not only do you have the fun activity of painting your own fish, but you're going to learn about water as you get there. One of the older programs as well that we do at Conservation Halton is called the Yellowfish Road program. So that's something everybody's seen. You've got yellowfish painted in front of storm sewers and that. Why? Because everything you pour into that storm sewer is ultimately going to wind up either in the lake or in a waste treatment facility that has to be figured out some means of treating it. So, pardon me, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, wasn't uncommon to see people pouring old motor oil down into storm sewer, because what are you going to do with it? It's too much of a hassle to take it to wherever. So it's getting people's minds around where that water's going to wind up. And they just forget, as I touched on earlier and Beverly's talked about, they forget that if you dump water into a sewer and it goes to a waste treatment plant, it's going to wind up back in the lake that you're drawing your water from.
And also the cost of treating that water is becoming incredibly high.
And this is where source protection comes in. This is where, if you guarantee the quality of water at the source, you will spend so much less on treatment options that the savings will be huge. But to most people, that you're trying to educate. It's what are you going to save for me today? Not what's going to happen 10 years from now or 15 years from now once everything is done, but what are you going to save for me today? So it's our duty, our obligation to explain to them how it will benefit them long term. And touching on something we were just talking about, if you look at the modern way of planning a city or modern way of planning a subdivision right now in Halton Region, a lot of emphasis is placed on natural heritage systems, natural linkages. How are they all formed? They're around creeks, they're around streams, they're making sure that there's buffer zones. Why? Protection of wetlands. Why? Simply because they help guarantee the quality of the water. They help guarantee the quality of the environment in which we live. And it's a simple thing. It doesn't cost a lot of money. But once you get these things in place, they will help ultimately with saving people money down the road. Wetlands are a perfect example for generations. Got to get rid of those wetlands. They're swamps. Nobody wants them.
And we can build on them.
They're nature's filters is what they are. I mean, they serve, in our case, they serve the dual purpose of not only filtering water, but they also serve the purpose of acting as a floodway. A natural floodway is going to be those wetlands. So they're becoming, and we're recognizing now more and more. And it's educating developers, it's educating the general public how important a wetland actually is for water quality. So those are some of the things.
And they're doing that also in Toronto now. They turned the brickworks into a wetland, beautiful area, and they beautified it. What's funny is we're kind of going back to that. They ended up removing all those things, and then now we're putting it back, but at a cost. We have to get people and communities involved to offset those costs because they're very expensive to recreate.
Now, maybe somebody at this table can clarify something for me. We signed a free trade agreement that I understood did not include water. But is there pressure from the U.S. in particular to ship our water down to the U.S.? That should concern people.
There are certainly in the western states a much greater pressure to ship water and have rivers diverted, the Red River and others to flow south. But in the Great Lakes, one of the challenges is, and one of the good things about the Great Lakes is the Great Lakes Charter, which is an agreement between Canada and the U.S. about the quantity of water and who gets to take water out and how much. And there's a very strong binational agreement on this. It's completely separate from free trade. This is with a Great Lakes agreement. So when people want to start shipping water out of Chicago or down out of Lake Michigan to Chicago and elsewhere, there's the opportunities for a binational committee to look at this stuff and make decisions and to try and ensure that the water in the Great Lakes continues to flow down to the benefit of all. And so I think the free trade is a bigger issue for bottled water because, and it gets back to the bottled water concern. You have a number of groups who would like the province to put a price on water and charge the water bottlers, not just give them a permit and charge the fee to process the permit, but to actually charge for the water that goes in the bottles and gets taken away. I can understand that, but the minute you allow that to be charged, then it becomes a commodity. And once it's a commodity, then it's open to the free trade rules.
So that's what we have to be concerned about.
Yeah, you have to be worried. And so whenever you hear someone say, well, we should charge the bottlers for the water they take out of the ground, if you do that, then you make your water a commodity and it's open to free trade and you have trouble holding on to it.
My producer is telling me to get to this tweet, and so let's see that. Does the region of Halton have a master plan to address the long-term effects of population growth and its relationship to water purification and distribution and wastewater treatment and collection? My goodness sakes, that's...
we need a second hour.
we should invite that person on the show. Has anybody got a comment?
Well, they do. It's called the official plan. Mm-hmm. And every municipality has an official plan. And they're all linked together. If Halton Hills, we just went through the exercise and changed our official plan. And we submitted it to the region of Halton for their approval to make sure that we were tied into all of the programs that the region of Halton.
And Conservation
and-
Halton
and-
is a
commenter on that.
comments on
Yep,
the official.
so that they would do that. Now, we just did that with our, the same process with our zoning bylaws. We brought together zoning bylaws from Acton, the Squeezing Township, and Georgetown that had not been brought together when the municipality was formed in 1974. And finally, we have a comprehensive zoning bylaw that affects the entire community. But that bylaw...
Is it being challenged, though?
It's being challenged for, not water, but for other reasons. And we're down now to one challenge. So we're doing pretty good on that, getting that put together.
Well, it depends what you gave away to get
Yeah,
those
yeah.
other ones off the
Yeah.
challenge. And,
Not ver- not very
that's
much.
what
Yeah.
that's what's not said in an open venue.
Well-
It's done behind closed doors.
But
Beverly,
I was
did
going
you
to
want
say,
to
in
comment?
addition, and David is quite right about the planning process under the Planning Act, the things that are done, but the region is also responsible, and I know they're in the process of updating their master servicing plan. And they, in fact, do have to have a long-term water supply master plan and wastewater master plan. They're going through that process right now, I believe, of updating it, David,
Yep, they
because
are.
they're looking at how they're going to service the water in South Georgetown, and I know they're proposing a lake-based supply on that, but it's in
That
the...
means the pipe.
It means
is
a
going
pipe
to go north, and it's
to-
going to happen to Halton Hills. What happened to Milton?
No.
There's a pipe, the South Georgetown population, it will be served by a pipe. That
And
decision's been
is
made,
it-
as
is
I
that gonna
understand,
be
by
a-
Halton region.
Is that going to be a pipe from
Lake
the lake,
Ontario.
or so the
Yes.
negotiations with Peel didn't?
Oh, no, I didn't go
didn't work
there.
out.
I didn't say via which municipality.
Okay,
A pipe to Lake
Okay,
Ontario.
okay. Good to skirt that issue in its entirety.
Negotiations continue.
Yeah, but that's the issue. Don't you have to educate more than just the next generation coming up? Don't you have to get to the developers and make some inroads there and make sure that they know how important this valuable commodity is to each and every one of those new homes that's going up in their area?
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because obviously if you're in the development business, your job is to make money. That is what your ultimate goal is, to maximize your profits based on the land that you have. And this is where, when I look at Halton region as an example, the fact that if we look at North Oakville, so you're talking Dundas Street to the 407, the fact that they were able to get the developers to commit 40% of the land they own to natural heritage in a natural environmental state is a miracle almost when we look back on it, and it's great. But we can also use that model as we go forward, and some of them don't like it, to be perfectly honest. They feel they're overregulated, but it's working with them, getting them to understand. And I've really noticed in the last 5 years particularly with the bigger developers, they understand the importance of what they're doing now. They understand. They're coming more prepared to talk to us, to talk to the region, to talk to the local municipality about how they're going to maintain.
Not just fight the
Not
issue.
just
at
fight
the
the issue. It's
Ontario
going to be,
Municipal
this is
Board.
how it's going to be. We have to do this. And there are some, honestly, who will still go to the OMB at the drop of a hat because that's just what they do. But I'm finding that you're seeing a little bit of a shift in more and more of their thinking in terms of dealing with us, dealing with the environment, the benefits. You know, like the reality is, if you look at some of the development in Milton, and I'm guessing you'll see it in South Georgetown, there was a time when you had to get rid of all the woodlots because that was X number of homes. And then you force them to keep the woodlots, and what do? Well, we can charge more money now for those homes that ring the woodlot because you're backing on to natural green space, right? So there's that benefit to them by doing that. But it isn't a long exercise. We are dealing with a lot of old school. There are a lot of old school developers in the province of Ontario who've been doing it for a long time. And one of the things I hear a lot in meetings is, well, it used to be better the way we used to be able to do things and get stuff done, and until you guys came along and started causing us issues. But we're like, okay, well, I'll take that as a bit of a compliment that we're able to, ensure the healthy state of the natural environment.
At least you know that they know that you're there.
That's right. That's right.
And that's an important thing. Folks, in the last couple of minutes, I just would like you to think about one thing that you'd like to tell our audience about source water, or what you think. And we'll start with you, Rob. What do you think that people should know that they don't know about the water that we drink and use every day?
Really, I think the municipalities need to do a better job just getting the word out of what these things truly cost. We've had on our show before about transit, and now we're talking about water. And these are the basics, I think, that any municipality is offering to the constituents. The problem is they really don't know the true cost, and a lot of them, of course, are offset. And I think we really need to start looking at that. And I think if we educate people more, like you said, especially children, that'll come through the pipe later on down the road. And it's not to say that adults, of course, aren't going to be able to comprehend those changes. I think what it is quite often the voters are very busy people in their lives, and they just, as I said, go along their merry way and turn on that tap water and have no idea how much it costs. I think we just need to do a better job.
Okay. Mr. Politician,
There you go.
I'm going to give you the last word on water at the table. You are involved with Conservation Halton, with the Source Water
Yes.
group. Now, what do you want to say to the people?
Well, what I want to really say to the people of Halton and Halton Hills particularly is that you are being well looked after by the people who are dealing with these issues professionally, day after day after day. The way they're integrating all of the different concerns and issues, good example, you were just talking about the developers and whatnot. Our mayor, with his green plan and his attempt to green Halton Hills to the maximum, put together a sustainability program. Part of that was bringing in the developers who are going to develop southwest Georgetown. And
okay,
these
you
guys
got to make it quick. I just
okay,
got about
they
30
put together
seconds.
a green building checklist. And a lot of the things that you would think that would be, they should have been in the older houses, are going to be in the newer houses when they start building those houses. And it will be a benefit to us.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I've really enjoyed this this conversation. Beverly Thorpe from the Drinking Water Source Protection, CTC. Okay, thanks a lot for being here. Dave Kentner from Ward 3 in Halton Hills. Thanks a lot, Dave. Rob, thanks again for joining us.
You're welcome.
And Ken Phillips from Conservation Halton. Thanks a lot for being here. And to our viewers, we thank you very much for joining us and maybe learning a little bit more about something that you use every day. So for TV Cogeco, I'm Mark Carr for The Issue here on TV Cogeco, truly local television.